Hello, Pre-K. It's story time. Are you ready to hear a story from my favorite book, the Bible? It's my favorite book, and I have in this, remember our Bible animals, the Animal Bible Story book? I love this one so much, and it's got a story about Jesus rising from the dead, coming back to life after he was on the cross, coming back to life. And I love this one so much. And it's about a rooster, and the rooster's telling the story, and so it's called One Scared Rooster. I'll try to hold it where you can see it. I'm a rooster, but not just any rooster. I don't live in a farm like other roosters. I live in the city. But not just any city. I live in Jerusalem, the holy city. That's where I do my job. But it's not just any job. The job God gives me is to get his people up and going every morning. I crow, which in rooster language means, "Wake up, God's people, the darkness is ending, the daylight is near." I've done my job every day since I was a little new rooster. Well, almost every day. Let me tell you about the time I didn't do it. It was Holy Week, the Passover holiday. We talked about the Passover. Remember, guys, talked about the Passover? Jerusalem was crowded with people who came to celebrate. One of the visitors was a man who stirred up that whole city of Jerusalem, and his name was... Do you think you know who it was? Who do you think was the man? Jesus! It was Jesus. On the day Jesus rode in, people rushed out to meet him, shouting and waving tree branches, and the crowd was so big, I almost got trampled. But I wasn't afraid. The next day, Jesus threw some money changers out of the temple. He called them robbers and turned over their tables, and it was very loud, but I wasn't frightened. The next day, Jesus made some of the leaders angry because he told the truth about the bad things that they did. They looked mean. They're up here. But they didn't scare me. Jesus had some friends who stayed close by him. One especially caught my eye, a man named Peter. He stood straight and tall beside Jesus, proud to be one of his best friends. Peter looked like a brave man, and I liked him. Those are the disciples. I saw Jesus' friends, his disciples, listen to Jesus and obey him and help him, and they called him Lord. And one day, they were throwing me some kernels of grain, and I heard Jesus say, "In 2 days, some people will put me to death on a cross to die." But Jesus' friends didn't understand and believe it. Peter told Jesus he would never let that happen. Yeah, I told myself, that Peter, he'll never be afraid. On the last night of the Passover week, the sky was lit by a full moon. I was strutting through the city streets to check on my city, and I saw people everywhere staying up late. I pecked at their toes to remind them it was time to get to bed. They needed their rest so that they could be strong the next day and to do the jobs that God gave them to do. After all, who knows what tomorrow will bring? It's fun. Get to bed. Get to sleep. Go to sleep. It's bedtime. I stepped outside the city walls to the garden, the olive tree, where the olive trees grew in the garden. On other moonlit nights, I'd often found olives there on the ground, and my favorite bedtime snack was olives. Tonight, under the trees, I found Peter and a few others sleeping. Then I heard a strange noise, but I wasn't afraid. He's a very brave rooster. I turned and saw Jesus on the ground, yet he wasn't sleeping. In the moonlight, I saw his face covered in sweat, and he was praying. I heard him saying, "I'm so full of sadness, Father, and this sadness is so heavy. But Father, whatever you want to happen, let it happen. This is when Jesus was praying in the garden. I watched him for a while, then I got sleepy and I took a nap. So the rooster went to sleep too, just like the disciples. The sound of fast and heavy footprints woke me up. Won't this city ever get quiet tonight? I wondered. A group of men had entered the garden, some leaders and temple soldiers. They all had cranky faces, and the soldiers carried swords and clubs. Peter at first tried to fight them, but then he slipped off. The soldiers grabbed Jesus and led him away. Jesus needed help. I followed him back through the gate and into the city. One of the soldiers tried to kick me out of the way, but he didn't scare me. We entered a courtyard lit by torches. Lots of people were there. More soldiers and leaders and servants and others. They tried to shoo me away, but I wasn't afraid of them. I wondered where all of Jesus' friends were. After all, he needed their help now more than ever. Were they frightened? I saw Peter sneaking into the courtyard. I flapped my wings to say hello, but he held his hands in front of his face. He was acting like he was afraid. Peter in the courtyard asked people in the courtyard asked Peter if he had been with Jesus. But Peter answered, no, he absolutely, positively certain, without a doubt. He didn't even know Jesus. Uh-oh, guys. Peter just lied. He said, I don't know Jesus. I promise, I don't know Jesus. Uh-oh. Did Peter know Jesus? Yeah, now he's lying about it. Ooh. Oh, Peter. Oh, boy. I couldn't believe my ears. Peter was so afraid he didn't tell the truth. And he didn't even just do it once. He lied 3 times. After the 3rd time, I decided to crow. The night was nearly over and the daytime was coming. In the morning light, I thought maybe Jesus' friends would stop being so afraid and they'd come help him. I let out my loudest crow, and I did it again. Wake up, God's people, the darkness is ending, the daylight is near. I was about to crow a 3rd time, but through the doorway I saw Jesus again. The soldiers were leading him to another room. As he passed the doorway, Jesus turned his head. For a moment, he looked straight at Peter's face. See, Jesus knew what Peter did. He knew Peter lied. The soldiers shoved Jesus away, and Peter walked out. I wondered where he went. I hopped on the wall, and I looked over, and I saw Peter slumped over in the street, crying harder than I ever saw a man cry. Soon the sun came up, and people were awake and out and about, but no one came to help Jesus. I followed along as the soldiers and leaders took Jesus to different places in the city. They slapped him and beat him with their fists. They whipped him and spit on him and laughed at him. Even the crowds of people who had cheered before for Jesus, now they were screaming that they wanted him killed. But Jesus didn't scream back. He didn't hit back. He didn't yell at them or even ask them to stop. Some soldiers made Jesus carry a heavy wooden crossbeam made out of wood. At the top of the hill outside the city, they laid Jesus on the cross and they nailed his hands and feet to the wood. When I tried to get closer, they threw a hammer at me. But I wasn't afraid. I'm sticking with Jesus, I told myself, no matter what. But suddenly, in the middle of the day, it got dark. The sky got dark as night. There was no moon. There were no stars. What's this? I wondered. It's not time to get dark. I crowed this morning, and whenever I crow, we have a full day of daylight. Something was terribly wrong. My skinny rooster legs started shaking. I'm afraid! I'm afraid! I squawked, and I found some rocks for a hiding place. I slumped behind them, and I told myself I would never come out. Never, ever, ever! And from my hiding place, I saw daylight come and daylight go, but I stayed as quiet and still as those rocks. I was one scared little rooster. And I was still there, silent and scared, when early on the third day, well before sunup, a blinding, flashing light was all around me, brighter than the sun. I saw Jesus coming out of the tomb. He wasn't dead anymore. He was alive. I saw him, and I knew I would never have to be afraid again. What a morning! I fluttered back to the city, and I crowed my loudest crowing ever. Wake up, God's people! The darkness has ended, and the daylight is here. Now I really have something to crow about, and I'll never miss a morning again. The end.